It was one of many attempts to derail his New York City criminal trial, and it failed again. Today, a New York appellate court rejected Donald Trump's bid to have Judge Juan Merchan recused from the case, citing Merchan's daughter's work consulting for Democratic clients. The judges ruled that Trump's defense team failed to prove that Judge Merchan overstepped his authority by refusing to recuse himself. It also upheld Merchan's decision, denying Trump's argument that some of Trump's social media posts were covered by presidential immunity. Now, these denials are all happening as we await a consequential ruling from Judge Merchan on jury instructions, which will guide the jury as it tries to reach a verdict. Joining me now is Neal Katyal, former U.S. Acting Solicitor General and now an MSNBC legal analyst. Neal, it's great to see you. I have a lot of questions here. Pertaining first to the appeals court ruling, there have been so many denials throughout this trial. I assume that's the throw the spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks to it school of defense strategy. Does it have any kind of meaningful impact, though, in the bigger picture here?
Yeah, so it's a spaghetti strategy at the wall. It's also just kind of Trump's MO, being a loser. He lost once again, as he does time and again in the New York court system. So, the idea that this judge should be recused, I think, is laughable. I mean, this is a judge who's, if anything, bending over backwards to accommodate Trump and his antics. Like, just take all of Trump's defiance of the gag order. I would just tell you, Alex, if you or I did that, we'd be like going straight to jail. But Trump got off from that because this judge is given the benefit of every doubt. Today, also, the judge ruled against Trump's motion to try and say venue, the place where the trial's occurring in Manhattan, was impermissible because there was too much pretrial publicity and he couldn't get a fair trial. And it is true, there's a lot of pretrial publicity, a lot of publicity that he himself has ginned up in part. But legally, that's always been a loser because in order to change venue, you have to show some other place that doesn't have as much pretrial publicity. And of course, everywhere is following this case. It was the same argument when I prosecuted George Floyd as a special prosecutor. When I prosecuted the George Floyd murder, Derek Chauvin said, change venue. I can't get a fair trial in Minneapolis. And the trial judge there said, absolutely not. It's the same trial you get anywhere else. So none of this is surprising. And we're going to move to the main event, as you say, jury instructions, summation next week, and ultimately a jury verdict.
What are your, what are your sort of biggest questions around the jury instructions? We went through some of them with Duncan Levin and Christy Greenberg earlier this week, but I wonder if there's a particular looming question about the guidance that's going to be given to the jury that you're going to be focused in on as we get those instructions.
Yeah, and so for our viewers, like the jury instructions are actually the legal standards that the judge tells the jury. What are the elements that they're going to need to find as a jury in order to convict Trump? And, the money trial here, this trial is so intense, frankly, you think even the jury instructions are going to need an attorney at some point. But the major point of contention, I think, is the level of criminal mens rea, criminal intent. The defense is arguing for very specific language that would require the jury to find that Trump specifically intended to commit a campaign finance violation. And the prosecution, by contrast, is arguing for something more lenient. That's really important because that's one of the key ways in which this crime becomes not just a misdemeanor of falsifying business records, but rather a very serious campaign finance violation, a felony with the possibility of jail time.
When we talk about what the jury is going to be guided towards, what kind of instructions they're going to get, Trump did not testify in this case, despite his bloviating and suggestion and explicit assertion that he was going to testify. He explained why he didn't take the stand to ABC, I believe it was yesterday. Let us take a listen to his explanation. It's a full screen. Okay, I'm going to read it. Anything I did, he said, anything I did in the past, they can bring everything up. And you know what? I've had a great past, but anything. The other reason is because they have no case. In other words, why testify when they have no case? I don't do a great Donald Trump, Neal, but you get the gist of things, which is anything but saying I can't take the stand because I would be my worst possible witness in my own defense. Is that going to be something? Is the jury going to find out why Trump didn't take the stand? We know that there are a couple of key witnesses in all of this that didn't take the stand, and I would assume the jury has to be told why they didn't take the stand.
Yeah, so I called this, I think, on your show more than a month ago, and I said, look, Trump is all bloviating. He's going to testify and blah, blah. But of course, he's not going to testify. And he's not going to testify for two simple reasons. Number one, he's a chicken. And number two, his attorneys would never let him testify because there's too great a risk that he is going to perjure himself on the stand. And I further said, of course, he's going to blame it on someone else. He'll blame it on, the fact that there's no case or something like that. That's, of course, exactly what he did. All the things that he was saying about there being no case, he said a month ago. But at that point, of course, he was bloviating about testifying. Now he's not. Now, the jury is going to be instructed, and this is part of our Fifth Amendment, that they can't infer anything negative about Donald Trump from his decision not to take the stand. And that's absolutely his right. They're going to be told it expressly in the jury instructions. That doesn't say anything about the court of public opinion, where there is no Fifth Amendment. And of course, politicians act in a public environment. And if they don't take the stand, there's usually a good reason for that, which is not, oh, there's no case. It's because they're worried about showing up on the stand and having to tell the truth. And so I think we can make a certain inference from that. The fact that there's witness after witness who said Trump did it, and he's just sitting there silently, sitting on his hands. That tells us, I think, what we need to know.
When you talk about drawing inferences, Neil, I wonder, how you think the closing arguments are going to go based on what we saw on the last day of testimony. Bob Costello having quite a time on the stand with Judge Merchan and others. Where do you think where do you think they go from here, and what are your expectations?
So the Trump defense is really simple. This is not a case about Donald Trump. It's a case about Michael Cohen and his credibility. This is a guy who they're going to say has lied repeatedly, lied to the point where he had to go to jail, and you can't trust him. And the prosecution is going to say, A, there are a lot of reasons to trust him now, but B, you don't have to trust him because there's all sorts of corroborating documentary evidence. And someone like Trump, who, there's testimony that says he meticulously counted every cent going out of his accounts, the idea that he would have tolerated his attorney spending hundreds of thousands of dollars without his permission is just so against the Trump modus operandi as to make it unbelievable. So I think that's going to be the debate. Remember, in our system, the jury, all 12 of them have to find Trump guilty in order for him to be convicted. If one person says he didn't do it, then he can't be convicted. There may be a mistrial in that hung jury. And at that point, you'll have perhaps another trial. And I do think some of Trump's defense tactics in the case, particularly over Costello, would give the prosecution ample grounds to have a retrial. So we could be back here again if Trump doesn't get convicted next week.
You just had to say another trial, didn't you, Neil? We're not ready for that talk yet. Sir, it is great to talk with you and get your expertise on all of this. Really appreciate you, Neil Katyal. Thanks for making the time.
Thank you.